Uh, Well, hi everyone. I'm not sure how many of you have joined us. It's an interesting time zone difference. So our summit that's supposed to begin on March 16th it just begins in Brisbane. And we're doing it a night early in New York. So 8:30 in the morning, Australian Eastern Savings Time, or Eastern Standard Time, is Eastern Daylight Time in New York. So welcome. I just wanted to get everyone up to speed on what this is all about. We had planned a summit at Princeton University, and a number of the people you're going to be meeting over the next 3 days were invited to attend. And then with coronavirus and people cutting back on travel and all of the stress that we're facing, we decided to host what we think is the first LinkedIn Live summit ever hosted entirely online. So you're going to be meeting people in keynotes and one-to-one conversations with me. They're going to be panels. They're coming in from all over the world, from Armenia to Portugal to Brisbane, from India, from South Africa, across Europe, the United States. It's going to be a lot of people sharing their insights. And I've been doing this for almost 26 years now, and I've met a lot of wonderful people. And luckily, we've stayed in touch one way or the other. So I'm going to introduce you to someone who's pretty special in just a minute. Know that although this is live, and you can only watch it if you are on Facebook Live or if you are on LinkedIn Live right now. We're going to be hosting and sharing this once the session is completed in roughly about 35 minutes. It will be online, so you can watch it as your leisure. You can share it with others. You can learn. The whole reason we're doing this is to make sure that you, whatever role you play, from mental health professional to law enforcement to parents, we'll know what you need to know so that together we can join forces and make sure all of our children are safer online, especially safer from internet sexual predation, sexual exploitation, child abuse, the pain and horrors that can come from sexting when sextortion gets involved and reputations get involved. So you'll meet a lot of people over the next couple days. And I'm going to start just a minute or two early if Jon will let me, and we'll bring him on screen, and I will turn his mic back on. So I'm not very good at technology, as Jon knows. I just play a technologist on television. But this is Jon Rouse, and Jon and I have known each other for a long time. I'll let him explain how we met. And we've run into each other in Kerala and India and wherever we are in the world, because Jon is the one that everybody turns to when they're looking to stop crimes against children. He's been doing it forever. Australia made him the most incredible, wonderful Australian in the world award last year. And he is calm and careful, and more importantly, he puts kids first. And that's all what the summit's about. So, Jon, welcome. Good morning in Brisbane.
Yeah, good evening in the East Coast of the United States, Parry.
Now, I know we were going to do this as a discussion, but I know you've got some slides that would be wonderful if you could share. So I'm going to let you run with this, and then I'll interrupt you from time to time, and we can talk from time to time. So I'm going to get off the screen and put you on it because you're a lot better looking than I am, and it'll be pretty great to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I guess what we talked about doing was essentially a little bit of a journey, or my journey anyway, with respect to investigating crimes against children. So I started in this field in 1996, so quite a long time ago, and the internet was really just coming online around about that stage. I don't have coronavirus, so I've just got a cold. And the early communication platforms that were available in those days were very, very limited compared to what they are today. So I said I've been a cop now for 36 years, and predominantly my whole career has been in child protection. But I was a little bit of a geek too. I was an online gamer back in the day, and I built computers and stuff like that. So I was naturally drawn to this area of investigation. But if you go back in time, probably the one that set the scene for all of us was Operation Cathedral. There's a little bit of a video here about the Wonderland Club. You can always Google that and get some history on it. I think Wikipedia's got some information, but there's a hidden group operating on IRC. So that's going way, way back, and you can watch that video online as well. But IRC was the platform that predominantly we were focusing on back in those days, and that's a screenshot that I actually took in 2005. The kind of channels that were available back then are still available today. You know, pedo mums and dad and daughter sex and groups like that. And you could either chat in these forums or you could exchange images as well. And this is the dawn of when images of children being sexually abused were a currency in themselves. So we infiltrated those groups, and in Europe particularly, they were very effective in dealing with IRC. And this is where we first started getting our feet wet in Australia 20 years ago. Some of the chat rooms are available. And IRC is still running today. It's still a communication platform that's used by all sorts of people, including child sex offenders. Then we had kind of the big dawn breakers, Operation Landslide and Operation Falcon. I'll talk about those briefly, but Landslide was the first one that hit the US. That was an era when, I don't know if you remember, if you were on the internet back then, but pop-ups, you just got inundated with child exploitation or child abuse website pop-ups. It was just amazing how easy it was to access child abuse material going back to that era. The Reedy investigation, Landslide in the United Kingdom, Jim Gamble was involved in that, and I remember him saying that it basically went into a drawer because they didn't know what to do with it in the United Kingdom. Over 7,000 names were given to the UK. The stats were quite staggering. Over 100 children removed from sexually abusive situations in the United Kingdom. And then we had the big one for Australia. This is where things changed dramatically for us, Operation Falcon. And it was a big one in the United States as well. This is the era, like I said, where pay-per-view child abuse websites, people were using their credit cards. An enormous operation in the United States that essentially changed the face of the crime type in Australia. We had, over 1,700 Australian-based transactions. Ultimately, 708 were referred to Australia. In Queensland, where I work, and we led the operation in our jurisdiction here in Queensland, we arrested 78 people, 2,600 charges. But the significant thing here, and this is the game changer for us, was that we found 8 child victims when we executed the search warrant. So our detectives were actually looking for contact offences in the offenders' collections, as opposed to, I guess, essentially what a lot of police continue to do, and that is just they go in, they find child abuse material, they arrest, and they move on to the next case. They don't treat these people like the contact offenders that they should be. This changed legislation in Australia, it changed penalties, and it removed the crime from being victimless. And it made Australia realise that we actually have these people sitting here in our country as well. Leading into that investigation, I touched base with you, Parry, and I was looking, I guess, for a campaign poster that we could use to really highlight that children are being harmed in these investigations and by these people. So this is kind of where we met. We had a teleconference, and you agreed to let us use this poster that you developed as part of our campaign, and we had all of the states and territories in Australia badge this and use it, and it still hangs on my wall here in Australia. And I know that you've done something with that. I don't know if you want to interject on that now and talk about it, but the context of child pornography obviously wasn't a palatable word. We've changed it in our legislation. We don't use that term, and anytime I speak publicly, you'll never hear me use the word child pornography. It's here under our legislation, it's child exploitation material, or child abuse material. But it still doesn't diminish the fact that that was a really, really effective campaign poster that you put together. So do you want to talk about what you've done?
Well, just a touch. And, it's interesting when we go back 25, 26 years and look at all of this. The organization I founded in 1995 was known as the Marshals of IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat. So it's not the web part. And I'd always have to be accompanied by one of my volunteers who knew how to code it so I could go there. But that's where the bad stuff was really happening. And that's where all of the bad guys were hiding. And you had mentioned using child sexual images as currency. And what they had were F-serves. They were special servers. That's early cloud. And if you wanted to access then child pornography, now child sexual abuse images, you would have to upload X number of images. Each would be valued and given a certain number of points. And then once they were up, you could then download the number of images equal to those points. And literally it was like, bartering. And it was pretty awful. And we were heavily involved in those days working with the Prime Minister in the UK, so many other law enforcement groups. Tomorrow, my time, we're going to be talking to Kevin Vicker. And Kevin was the one who created the RCMP, Crimes Against Children Task Force, to handle the cases that came out of Cathedral. So it's very interesting. You'll be talking over the next couple of days to a lot of the people who were there from the beginning, but I don't think anyone does it as well as you do. So this is a new image. We're going to give it to you. We need a new one. And I want it signed by all of the groups. And I even mentioned it to the Home Affairs Minister when we were in Washington with our Attorney General and the Home Office Secretary. And I talked to him about this. He remembered the campaign. He spoke very highly of you. And I think there really is a need to keep this going and maybe make it bigger than ever. Now I'm going to be quiet and let you finish.
Okay. All right. So rolling on from then, the next thing that I got kind of pulled into was a Newsgroup investigation, and that was Operation Achilles. I met some great people during that operation. You can see the agencies. This is when, it really started to become international and we started working cooperatively across borders. Operation Achilles focused, like I said, on newsgroups, and this is just another early mechanism that people use to share information, but it was used to share child exploitation material as well. And there's thousands of newsgroups, but the ones that we were focusing our resources on were the ones that's focused on the distribution of child exploitation material. Anyway, one of these particular newsgroups, we managed to infiltrate it, and we worked very closely with Arnold Bell and his team at Innocent Images and the FBI in Washington. We sent one of our covert operatives over to the USA, and he was embedded for 18 months in Washington, D.C. to bring down this network. And but those little dots were where they were scattered across, the key players were scattered across the United States. They're all doing 15 to 50 now. And globally, that was the first time that we actually infiltrated and brought down a child sex offender network that was very, very sophisticated in their communications. But, what's old is new again, and we continue to do that, and I guess we'll talk about that as we keep going on. Peer-to-peer started coming in, obviously, as another communications and file sharing platform. You'd probably remember the issues around Grokster and music file sharing, but the sharing of child abuse material on peer-to-peer continues to be a significant challenge for law enforcement. But in the US, ICAT COPS and CPS, Child Protection Systems, are two of the platforms that were developed for and by law enforcement to tackle this problem. And we continue globally to make a lot of arrests out of those platforms. I know in the United States, the ICACs are very, very aggressive in working on peer-to-peer. You'd be aware of how we do the mapping too. So this is just Indonesia, just as an example. But it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you'll see that the actual distribution of child abuse material on peer-to-peer is way beyond our capability to service. I think it's been equated to the equivalent of trying to take a sip from a fire hose. I've heard police talk about it that way. But each of those red dots is a unique IP that's sharing child exploitation material. Global issue, doesn't matter where you go. I think looks like probably the coronavirus map for Italy at the moment, but that's their peer-to-peer mapping, and India as well. So on peer-to-peer, that led to the next big major investigation we kind of got pulled into. And it started with our colleagues over in New Zealand at the DIA, who've always been very effective working in this environment. They made an arrest on a peer-to-peer target. When they executed the search warrant, they found a number of images that weren't child abuse material or child exploitation, but they were kind of concerning. Professional photos, but not the kind that you would take as a parent. They've passed that across to us because it had a link to Australia, and we did the network mapping of the group. And it ultimately led to, this is actually video that the offenders produced of their kid, but that little boy was from a Russian orphanage. These two offenders paid around $10,000 to purchase him as a baby, and they brought him across to Australia. They were a homosexual couple. But we know for a fact that they planned the purchase of that little boy way before he was born. And tragically, he was exploited across the world. But some great work by the US Postal Service, Brian Bone, and ourselves back here in Australia managed to track down all of the scenes where he was abused. And those two guys ended up getting arrested, and they're currently in custody in the United States, serving 40 and 30 years for what they did to him. I guess these things carry, they build up with you over the years, and it's always a little hard sometimes to talk about the cases that you were involved in that took years to bring to an end. But yeah, that was a tough one.
I always explain, and both of us have been doing this since 1995, in my case, 1996 in yours. And I always say, if you see one of these images, it's like a hot branding iron applied to your raw brain. You're never the same. You
No.
can never see a father hold a child in his lap without looking carefully. There are all these things that you listen. If a child cries in the background, you're on immediate alert. And people need to know that those like you who stand on the battlefield taking these things on are personally affected and permanently affected by what it is you've seen and learned about.
No, that's a total fact. I mean, you can't forget, or you can't unsee what you've seen, and the things that we've heard as well collectively. But that's why we come to work, because that young lad has got a chance at least having a semi-normal life, I guess. Now, at least we stopped the abuse. But I guess the key thing about a lot of the things I'm saying is that I'd like you to take away is that the global cooperation between law enforcement now is significant. We have a brilliant network of people globally that all like me, men and women that I've been working with for many, many years, that do this. They come to work every day because they want to stop sexual abuse in its tracks. And we can talk about the good and the evil of the internet, but holistically, it's given us an opportunity to intercede very, very early in children's lives now, and in many cases, they will never know that we even had any involvement in bringing them to a place where they're safe. So I guess let's quickly now, I don't know how much time we've got, but we'll quickly talk about Tor.
Well, we've got as much time as you want. So, Jon, this is so important. And your work is so valuable. I remember in the early days, the very early days, where we had a traveler, which for a lot of the viewers not familiar with this is what we used to call the internet sexual predators who would arrange face-to-face meetings. And in the United States, we call them travelers because they'd go across state lines, which gave the FBI, U.S. Customs in those days, and postal jurisdiction. And I remember that law enforcement, or FBI in particular, would reach out to try to get local law enforcement to set up the meet at a mall or whatever, and they wouldn't talk to each other. And they'd call me and I'd have to intercede so that they would cooperate. And I remember calling you. I remember calling so many others. In Hong Kong, there was a case and I couldn't get law enforcement from Mexico to get the cooperation they need in Hong Kong. So you have to sit on the phone and be nice to people so that they'd cooperate. And now the world has changed dramatically. Thank goodness.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They aren't needed anymore. I can retire.
No, we can't let you retire, Parry. you got too much to do. But you're correct. I mean, we are working now in real time across borders. You know, there's lots of things I can't talk about that we're doing, but just rest assured that law enforcement is working very effectively and efficiently together now, and as we should be. You know, this is about stopping sexual abuse in its tracks, and we've come a long way, and technology's helped us do that. And you know, we'll get onto encryption, I guess, as part of our conversations. But one of the platforms that child sex offenders do gravitate towards is Tor, the onion router, the darknet, and it's a perception that they have of anonymity there. But you know, we've proven time and time again that there's no safe haven for child sex offenders, and you'll never defeat the will of law enforcement to bring them down. And one example of that was Operation Rhodes, which we ran out of Australia. It had, once again, you know, Europol, COP, FBI, DIA, Spanish. It had the whole world involved in it, but it all kicked off in Canada with Project Spade, where Toronto, the Toronto Police, who are one of the, you know, they've always been one of the most aggressive law enforcement agencies in the world in this crime type. We've actually got one of their best working here now in Brisbane with us, Warren Bullman. But you know, I know Paul Crawshack and Paul Gillespie and all the guys from Toronto over the years.
And Kim, who took over after Paul in those olden days. You know, I remember when Paul reached out to Bill Gates saying, "Can you help us come up with technology?" We gave them an award for having done that at the U.S. Senate. I tried to get you to come to that, but nobody could afford the airfare. But we were going to have a lot of those people who started it all over the next 3 days, because one of these days we're going to get hit by trucks or retire. We need to make sure that the new generation has the things that are in our head so that they can move forward on crimes that are increasing against children.
Yeah, that was the child exploitation tracking system by Microsoft. And, you know, like they're still involved, not so much Microsoft in that area anymore, but John Hancock is still involved with HubStream, and he's still helping us do our job. So these people don't go away. You know, they all did this for the right reasons for kids, and it's just evolved. But those networks are critical, and you know, having Warren working here with us now in Brisbane is great. We haven't lost his skill and his knowledge.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So anyway, good old Toronto, they kicked this one off. Project Spade, it was a pay-per-view website, you know, and they sent leads globally. One of those leads came to us here in Queensland, and we executed a search warrant. And when the guys kicked in the door, they managed to find his systems up and running, which was critical for us. And ultimately, that particular individual had an account on a website called the Love Zone. So we did what we do here in Queensland, and we commenced a long-term infiltration of that website. But predominantly when we do this, we're looking for victims. And, you know, we didn't have any immediate expectation that we were going to bring down a major network. But we did know that by harvesting child abuse material, we'd rescue kids, and we did do that. But ultimately, we took out the head member of that board, a fellow by the name of Shannon McCool. He was a childcare worker in South Australia. We worked with our colleagues down there and executed a search warrant at his house. You know, apart from the child abuse material, you've always got to remember that we're also dealing with some pretty disgusting crime scenes as well. But ultimately, we took over his account as well, ran the board for a while, took down a whole lot of people. And, that's global cooperation at its best. All those countries were involved in that. Lots of leads were sent out, and I think we sent a message to the tour community that, there is no safe haven. But the other thing we did, Parry Aftab, was that we actually brought the world together. And all those digital seizures, all that evidence that we had from all of the arrests. I'll just play a little bit of a video here because Cathal Delaney from Europol was involved in orchestrating this with our victim identification manager, Paul Griffiths.
He's pretty amazing himself. So
yeah, Cathal is a great guy. Paul Griffiths, our VID expert here in Brisbane, came up with this idea to get all the digital data together. And I'll just play this video for you.
I don't think I have sound. Is that me or the? No.
Oh, you can't hear this, Parry?
I've got it, but I can't hear it.
Oh.
So it's possible that I did something. But we'll get it and show it. So
yeah, I'll share the video with you.
Yeah, and Neckine's going to be joining us as well this week, so that'll be
good. So
yeah.
Who's coming in from there?
Anna.
Oh, okay, yeah, Anna. Okay, we worked predominantly with their product Griffeye on this. That's Christian Berg,
right,
is the man. He started NetClean. The tool that they developed, which we continue to use, is Griffeye. But when they ran this, you can see the stats there, which is critical. We found new material and we rescued children by bringing all this data together, and that's the key thing. We talked about grooming.
What we can do to use data to protect and find children too. So there's a lot, and Artemis has just been pulled together, and we're Thorne's going to be joining us, and a few people. So I'd love to see how that's going to be working.
Yeah, and we work closely with Thorne as well. So it's good seeing all of these players helping us do our job, and nobody can do this on their own. The fact that industry has come in and different people have focused their capabilities with technology to help us rescue children. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. I think, as my good friend Colm Gannon says, it takes a network to defeat a network, and that network needs to go beyond just law enforcement. Looking at, I think, grooming, you mentioned that before with travelers. We continue to see that. This is a fake Facebook account that was set up by an offender. And this particular individual harvested a lot of ClearNet photographs that he used to purport to be himself, and then he just spammed children. And fortunately, a lot of them were smart enough to go, do I know you? I don't know you. And they didn't friend him, but one little girl did. And he progressively then utilized, and these are actually extracts from his communications, he then progressively tried to groom her. She sent material. She sent images of herself to him. That was him. And we've been dealing with online grooming for 20 years. It doesn't change. It's the applications that exist now give child sex offenders so many avenues to access kids. Early on, it was just IRC, and then it was MSN Messenger. But, as soon as devices went mobile and portable, we lost control. Yeah. And, there's no real way of reining that in now, the damage that's happened. I think there's about 7 years where we actually took our eye off the ball. And,
we don't. I see the same thing, and we were so busy fighting other things that we did take our eye off the ball, and look at what's happened. Yeah, I think our kids are more at risk than ever.
Totally. It's catastrophic now. You've got all of these, that's obviously Kick Messenger. The silly things that kids doing, am I pretty or ugly, posting these kind of messages and getting comments, and then they get cyber trolled and bullied.
And the challenges are serious. So the new hot thing on TikTok and pretty much every place else, and the kids are engaging it. It's sort of, I dare you. And so they're all doing it, and they don't think about what they're doing when they are.
No, and like I said, it's got consequences. I know you're talking to Carol Todd, I think, at some stage.
Yep.
So obviously, Amanda's video is still online. That's the tragic consequence that can come from this kind of thing. And we're doing, I mean, just the stuff that I've been taking you through here, we're doing our best at the pointy end from the law enforcement side of things. But, thank God for NECMEC with what they do with cyber tips. But, and we can talk about cyber tips now if you want to, but and the issues around regulation and encryption and end-to-end encryption and what that means for us. But
I mean, I think so. Years ago, when it was, gosh, I remember 1996, December 2nd, 1996, and there was a big White House summit, and it was run by Al Gore, and Facebook was AOL was the big voice there, and they looked at it, and we were trying to come up with ways that we could address child sexual images online. And Janet Reno was Attorney General at the time. So they came out with a safe harbor so that as long as the providers would report what they see, they don't have to look for it. But if somebody reports it to them or they encounter it, as long as they report child sexual abuse images to the cyber tip line, there was a safe harbor so that they couldn't be charged with possession or distribution of child pornography, and which is still used in our laws here in the United States, those terms. And so that was where the cyber tip line came from. And I think it's really important. I would love if we could get to encryption a little bit, because we can come back to the cyber tip, and I'm trying to get Michelle and John to join us. I know they're really busy, so we're working on it. But I would love if we could talk a little bit about what you're seeing on encryption and the problems that some networks that are planning to encrypt end to end are throwing at us that keep our children at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, those cyber tips are critical for us. There are reports that now, thankfully, with Microsoft stepping in and creating pDNA, photo DNA, these companies now have the capability to basically interrogate the data streams running across their platforms and determine if child abuse material is being disseminated, and then they can report it, and they report it to NECMEC, and it comes out as a cyber tip to us. Now, if you start putting end-to-end encryption, we will lose that. It will be gone. And what are the ramifications of that? Well, an example of a cyber tip that came to us from a Facebook pDNA hash. We had an individual who was purporting to be Justin Bieber online, and he'd engaged an 11-year-old child in the United States, and he sent child abuse material to that child. There was sexualized chat, and there was also money was being offered. So that came across as a cyber tip to us here in Australia from a Facebook referral. A lot of platforms were used by this offender, which is fairly atypical. He was using Facebook, Skype, Kik, Musical.ly, Omegle, and Snapchat at the time, with this Bieber identity that he had created. Ultimately, what that led us to was the arrest of an individual here, a 42-year-old university professor, and ultimately over 900 charges and nearly 160 children globally he had groomed. Now, if we hadn't got that cyber tip, we never would have stopped the abuse that this person was. And let me tell you, I'm not going to go into graphic details, but the things he was making children do, in some instances, the things he was making parents do to their children, would be continuing. I think I have a personal view on encryption. I think people have a right to their privacy, absolutely 100%. But if platforms are being utilized to facilitate criminal offenses, I think that tech providers and industry have a responsibility to make sure that that's not happening. And if you encrypt your data stream, well, okay, that's great. You can turn your back on it, and you'll lose visibility of it, and you'll, I guess, have no responsibility for that stream. But look what's happening, and how your platform will continue to be used. And that's just one example of information that we would have lost, and children would be continued to be abused by that particular individual if that cyber tip hadn't been generated because pDNA was used. So
I agree. And I think that, a lot of people don't really understand this, and they think that, law enforcement's going to spy on everything they're doing. And looking at this, they still require legal process. You need a subpoena, you might need a warrant or court order to be able to get this information. But if it's locked in a cast iron cone and no one can see it, even with court orders, even if you know that this person's doing something and the communications might lead to where that child is for a live molestation, that's being hidden. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's more than 20 million images last year in 2018 alone came from people communicating on Facebook Messenger. So more than 20 million images of children who were being raped, tortured, molested, seriously harmed came from people who are using Facebook Messenger. And now Facebook said, in the interest of privacy, we're going to make sure that law enforcement, even armed with a court order, won't be able to see it because no one can see it. So that's making me a little nauseous.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Parry. I don't understand the rationale. Unfortunately, there was a summit that was scheduled, and as you mentioned before, you met Minister for Home Affairs Peter Dutton. We did have a summit scheduled with Facebook here in Australia, but the coronavirus unfortunately stopped everybody's travel where we could talk about this and try to find a way forward. And I still hope that we can find a way forward that helps protect the community, because ultimately that's what it's all about. I have no interest in spying on people, but I've got a big interest in stopping children being abused.
Yeah, and I think if companies, if people are looking for anti-spy communications, they're not going to be using Facebook Messenger. That's for funny cat videos and what your kids had for their birthday parties. And I think that saying that people have communications that demand much higher protection online than they ever would have gotten offline, I think is misstating the problem.
Yep, I completely agree with you.
And we have Cheryl joining us too.
Oh, Cheryl Varden?
Yeah. So
right.
Cheryl, you just had on the screen the Commission of Family and Children and Queensland, and she's going to be joining us as well. So all the good people, and so many from Australia.
Well, we've got sunshine, we've got beaches, we've got kangaroos, and it's a great place. We worked with Cheryl. I think I was just looking through to see what some of that message was, and like we've talked about, law enforcement can't do it on our own. We need community's help. That screen I had there about this self-produced material is killing us at the moment. Our victim ID teams are predominantly in the collections that we're seeing, and we're seeing what kids are doing in their homes.
Yeah, so what you're calling is self-produced. I want the audience to understand we're talking about what we call sexting, where the kids are taking voluntarily because they're angry or because they're in love or because they're bored. They're taking sexual or sexually suggestive, actually sexually active images of themselves and sharing them, posting them, making them available to many people who want them.
That's exactly right. Well, that Bieber case I talked about was a classic example of that, where he would capture exactly what the child was doing and then use it to extort them. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of the offenders' collections. So we worked with Cheryl and the Queensland Family and Child Commission during Child Protection Week to put this message out. I don't know if you've got sound, but this is just a bit.
Knew how.
Okay, well, essentially, it was me and a whole group of our detectives basically saying a few things, and we gave our own individual messages to parents. And my message was, essentially what we're talking about now, what we're seeing, and my message was, if you'd seen what I've seen, you would never leave your child alone in their bedroom with an internet-capable device. And all of the members of our team at Argos did the same thing. We all gave our own message. So my feeling was, why do they need the internet? Why do they need an internet-capable device in their bedroom after they go to sleep? Take it away, because you don't know what they're doing, but we do, because we're seeing it when we make arrests.
And parties. So if they go to parties and somebody's been drinking or taking drugs, they're sexting in ways that nobody had ever expected. So
Yeah.
sextortion is a term I came up with when some interviewer talked to me about it, and I said, it's blackmail. It's really sextortion. And I thought that was a really great word. And I wish it hadn't
Yeah.
stuck, or I wish I had copyrighted it and gotten royalties. But what we're seeing is when these images are taken, they get into the hands of peers who are sexually exploiting their peers,
Yeah.
or, child molesters and traffickers who are doing it. And then what they do is they blackmail the kid, saying, I'm going to make it public. I'm going to send it to your mother, your brother, someone. If you don't pay me money, if you don't take more pictures, if you don't get your friends involved, if you don't engage in real life sex, or do more things on camera for me. And these young people are giving into that. When we saw that picture just very briefly of Amanda Todd is often seen as a cyberbullying suicide victim. We call them bullycides, but really, she ended up taking her own life because she was sextorted. And luckily, he was found in the Netherlands, and is coming to Canada for the hopefully deserving the kind of justice that exists. There were 125, 135 kids on in conversations with him that he was sextorting at the same time. So it's pretty awful. And hopefully what we're going to be learning that's hard to learn and listen to over the next few days will make us all smarter, so we can start finding solutions and helping you, Jon.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do need help. It's just a fact. Like I said, the good news is that our capability has increased exponentially. Our communications, we're using the technology for good to try to fight the way that technology is being used for evil. But I think I had a slide up there before that says it takes a village, and it does. We can't do this on our own. We're only one component of the child protection system. So we need tech providers and industry to step up and take some responsibility. My personal view is things are heading towards regulation because they're not stepping up. And I don't know if you're speaking to Julie Inman Grant, the Safety Commissioner for Australia, but her safety by design concept I thought is a really good one. You shouldn't be able to launch any kind of an application that facilitates communication unless it meets certain criteria.
And I think all of us are looking at that now. We call them standards or principles. And I'm working with the IEEE to try to create international standards, starting with those for law enforcement investigating crimes against children. And I think we need to start bringing conformity into that, so that whether you're dealing with Snap or TikTok or Instagram, the same request will give you the same results, making it a lot easier for you to do your job. And I think all of us have come together on the cyber safety by design and cyber safety standards position. I love Julie. I think she's doing amazing work.
Yeah, she has. She's done a really wonderful job. And it's a very challenging job too. Particularly her portfolio has grown exponentially. So, but yeah, she's a big part of the fabric for child protection in Australia.
Worldwide. I think people look at Julie from around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's key communication platforms and awareness messaging that gets out there. The AFP are still running the Think You Know program in Australia, so we're all trying to do our bit about the education and awareness part. Parents, carers, guardians, making sure they're taking responsibility for the technology they're putting in the hands of their children. They've got a responsibility too. They're giving them the device. Have the conversation with them about the safe use of it, and how to use Snapchat and all of the other. They're great. They're fun. All of these apps are really good, but they're also very dangerous.
Yeah, what we've found over the years is that the longer young people have without something they're actually intending to do online, so it's sort of boredom factor, the more trouble they get into. And it started with a survey we did of 30,000 teens, I think, in 1998 with one of the universities. And we found that the moment they spent more than an hour and a half online, and of course they didn't have the cell phones and tablets and those things then, that they started engaging conversations with others, started doing high risk activities. And recently our teen angels did research, and they found that 70% of the girls they polled, and I think there were a few thousand that they polled, said that they regretted what they had done on their webcam or
Yeah,
through images. That's 70%. We've got to
it's
get the
huge.
word out. It's really time to do that. We'll be giving SEALs, the cyber safety best practice SEALs, will be going to the sites that are complying with the standards we're creating.
Hmm. Yeah, well, there's no doubt that it's challenging, Harry. But like I said, from our front, we thank you for all you've done over so many years. Like 16 years I've known you now. That's just unbelievable, isn't it?
It is, and I'm getting so old. You better know me fast because I'm not sure where I'll are 6 and 8. And now with this
Wow.
new charity that we formed, we were Cyber Angels in the old days and changed our name to Wired Kids and then Wired Safety.
Yeah.
But this is
Yeah.
a new charity. It's a cyber safety group. And I hope you're going to sit on our board because I just haven't given you a formal invitation yet. But we're now looking just at the kids' issues. And my grandsons were in my living room complaining that I gave my golden doodle dog a role because he's our cyber safety service dog and we animate him. And so they're very upset with me. So they just created cyber safety agents for 6 to 12-year-olds where we're going to have them solving cases.
Great.
Yeah, it's great. And he keeps telling me what I need to buy as far as t-shirts and the rest. But we have one thing I want to do. So let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Hold on. And see if it works. Okay. So we have just shared that. We have one of our brands is the Internet Superhero brand, and we were very fortunate that Marvel, before Disney bought them, was one of our big sponsors and actually customized comics and put me into Spider-Man comics on cyberbullying and child safety. So we created the Internet Superhero brand. And every once in a while, not very often, we find someone who is a champion for children, without whom you couldn't ever talk about cyber safety and child protection and allowing young people and all of us to access a safer, more private, and more secure digital world. And that's this award. So you got a poster, and it talks about your special superpower is making sure that all of our children are safe. I'll send it to you. And it's been sitting there for a long time because I keep trying to host a conference and afford bringing you over, and you're busy and we're busy, and now we were able to do this. So this is a very, very special award. Jim Gamble got one of these many, many years ago. And I've been meaning to give it to you for the longest time. And it tells you how much I love you, how grateful all families and children should be, how law enforcement themselves speak so highly of you, Jon. They just see you as a leader, common sense, practical, with so much experience. It's never about ego with you. It's always about the kids. So this is your award, and I'll put it up at the site so people can read it and see it more. I know it's a little funny looking on the head, but I didn't draw it all. I'm saying,
Yeah,
oh no, taller, shorter, stronger.
I got a great head for radio, Parry. So,
Yeah,
but that'll.
I've got a great body for radio. So
You're very kind. Thank you so much. That will hang with pride next to my original campaign poster from 2004 that hangs on my wall just in front of me here. So I think of you every day, and thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, we need to get your minister involved so that he can get behind more of the work that we can do together. Because unless we do the Vulcan brain meld or whatever those things are, where we sit there and teach everyone all of these little baby bits and pieces, we'll never get where we need to go. So I'm grateful, and hopefully you and I will be friends wherever you're working and however I'm retiring, so that children will be safer. But, I love you so much, and I'm happy that you're happy and you have a great life and a wonderful wife, and you're getting so much accomplished, and you're in such demand, and we couldn't do what we do without you.
Well, thank you very much, Parry. Yeah, no, I consider myself very lucky to have fallen into a career that I actually care so much about. Not many people get that chance, I wouldn't, if I could take it all back and start again, I'd do exactly everything the same way again. You know, I don't think twice when I get out of bed in the morning, because I've got a great team and I've always worked with great people. That's probably the key thing. You know, you meet great people who all feel the same way that you do. And yeah, no, I consider myself very lucky. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I think we're all lucky that you are that way. And I appreciate it. I know with everything that's going on with Corona and offices being shut down and Interpol and law enforcement agencies all over the world trying to figure out how to do this from home. We have Neil Walsh, who's did something for me. He did a canned video from his kitchen. So it's interesting, but the internet is what we know best. And I can't think of a better way to get everyone together. And thank you so much for making your time available to us today.
Most welcome. Thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Love you.
Love you too. Thanks, Parry.
Bye-bye.
Bye.